My last in-depth video series on vitamin D was done more than 4 years ago, as in 15,950 papers ago. I had a lot of catching up to do. Review articles like this continue to be published touting vitamin D as a veritable cure-all. The vitamin D receptor is found in most tissues in the body, including the brain. Upwards of 2,000 genes may be regulated by vitamin D. Within 24 hours of vitamin D exposure, you can change the expression of hundreds of genes. The term vitamin, though, is actually a misnomer. Vitamins, by definition, cannot be synthesized within our body, but we can make all the D we need with sufficient sun exposure. D is not a vitamin, but a hormone produced by our skin in response to sunlight exposure. And it's not just a hormone of calcium regulation and bone health, but a hormone of fertility and immunity and brain function. But is it a panacea or a false prophet? Remember when vitamin E was the vitamin du jour, touted as curative for many clinical disorders? Vitamin E, the radical protector, with supplement sales in general forming a billion-dollar business to capitalize on the public's fears. After all, those with low levels of vitamin E in their blood had 50% higher cancer risk. Hey, and what about vitamin A or beta-carotene? After all, people who eat lots of greens and sweet potatoes and other beta-carotene-rich foods have lower risk of cancer, so hey, let's give people some beta-carotene pills. But when they were put to the test, beta-carotene pills increased cancer rates. Beta-carotene, vitamin A, and vitamin E supplements may increase mortality, and in fact we'd be potentially paying to shorten our lifespan. So you can understand the skepticism in the medical community regarding claims about vitamin D, which is now enjoying its moment in the sun. Having a $500 million vitamin D supplement industry doesn't help matters in terms of getting at the truth, not to mention the highly lucrative vitamin D testing industry that loves to talk about the studies suggesting having higher vitamin D levels may reduce the risk of heart disease and cancer and diabetes, autoimmune diseases, and infections. But most of this research stems from observational studies, meaning studies that correlate higher D levels in the blood with lower disease risk. But that doesn't mean vitamin D is the cause. Right? It's like the early beta-carotene data. Right? Higher levels in the blood may have just been a marker of healthy eating. Who has high beta-carotene levels? Those who eat lots of greens and sweet potatoes. Just like vitamin D levels may also just be a marker for healthy behaviors. Who has high vitamin D levels? Those that run around outside. And those who run around outside run around outside. Higher vitamin D levels may just be a sign of higher physical activity, for example. So when she sees studies like this, showing significantly lower diabetes rates among those with higher vitamin D levels, it doesn't mean giving people vitamin D will necessarily help. You have to put it to the test. And when you do, vitamin D supplements fall flat on their face. No benefit for preventing or treating type 2 diabetes. So when supplement companies wave around studies like this, suggesting vitamin D deficiency plays a role in obesity, because most population studies show lower vitamin D levels in the blood of those who are obese, is that just because they're exercising less, or simply because it's a fat-soluble vitamin, so it's just lodged in all that fat? One might expect obese sunbathers would make more vitamin D since they have more skin surface area, but the same exposure leads to less than half the D because it gets socked away in their fat. That's why obese persons may require 2 to 3 times the dose of vitamin D, though they may get it back when they lose weight and release it back into their circulation. So that would explain this population data. And indeed, when you put vitamin D to the test, try vitamin D as a treatment for obesity, it doesn't work at all. Similar story with artery health. Those with low vitamin D levels have worse coronary blood flow, more atherosclerosis, and worse artery function. But if you actually put it to the test in randomized controlled trials, the results are disappointing. Also ineffective in bringing down blood pressures. So this all adds to this growing body of science casting doubt on the ability of vitamin D supplementation to improve anything beyond just falls, fractures, the common cold, and all-cause mortality. Wait, what? Vitamin D supplements can make you live longer? That's kind of important. I'll explore that next.
Du solltest ein Vorbild für deinen kleinen Bruder sein. Aber alles, was ich hier vor mir sehe, ist ein drogenversiffter Penner.
Mir ist die Familie genauso wichtig wie dir.
Wieso setzt du nicht gleich in der Bank an die Schriebe und drückst ab?
Es tut mir so leid.
Loss of reality.
Ab jetzt wird alles anders. Ab jetzt wird alles besser.
Right now, almost two-thirds of Americans are overweight, and by 2030, more than half our population may be clinically obese. Childhood obesity has tripled, and most of them will grow up to be overweight as well. The United States may be in the midst of raising the first generation since our nation's founding that will have a shorter predicted lifespan than that of the previous generation. The food industry blames inactivity. We just need to move more. But what is the role of exercise in the treatment of obesity? There is considerable debate in the medical literature today about whether physical activity has any role whatsoever in the epidemic of obesity that's swept the globe since the 80s. The increase in calories per person is more than sufficient to explain the U.S. epidemic of obesity. In fact, if anything, the level of physical activity over the last few decades has actually gone up in both Europe and North America. This has important policy implications. Yes, we still need to exercise more, but the priorities for reversing the obesity epidemic should focus on the overconsumption of calories. To work off the increased caloric intake, which for kids is like an extra can of soda and small fries, compared to what they were eating back in the 70s, and for adults, like an extra Big Mac a day, to work that off, we'd have to walk like 2 hours a day, 7 days a week. So exercise can prevent weight gain, but the amount required to prevent weight gain may be closer to twice the current recommendations. Public health advocates have been experimenting with including this kind of information. The fast food menu labeled with calories and the number of miles to walk to burn those calories appeared to be most effective in influencing the selection of lower-calorie meals. Now, exercise alone may have a small effect, and that small effect can make a big difference on a population scale. A 1% decrease in BMI nationwide might prevent millions of cases of diabetes and heart disease, thousands of cases of cancer. But why don't we lose more weight from exercise? It may be because we're just not doing it enough. I mean, the small magnitude of weight loss observed from the majority of exercise interventions, where they make people exercise, may be primarily due to how low the doses are of the prescribed exercise. People tend to overestimate how many calories are burned by physical activity. For example, there's this myth that a bout of sexual activity burns a few hundred calories. So hey, you could get a side of fries with that. But if you actually hook people up and measure energy expenditure during the act, and your study subjects don't get too tangled up with all the wires and hoses, though it may be nearly the metabolic equivalent of calisthenics, given that the average bout of sexual activity only lasts about 6 minutes, a young man might expend approximately 21 calories during sexual intercourse. Of course, he would have spent roughly one-third that just lying around watching TV, just basal metabolism, so the incremental benefit is plausibly on the order of 14 calories. So maybe we could have like one fry with that.